Thank you all, everyone, for joining us tonight. I'm Mary Baranaga. I'm president of the Idaho Medical Association. And welcome to the House of Delegates Advocacy Bootcamp. We have designed this to familiarize you all who are new to the House of Delegates process, as well as to serve as a refresher for everybody else. So thanks for attending. I'm joined by other IMA leaders today, and I will now introduce Vice Speaker Dr. April Dillian. Hi, April. IMA Government Affairs Director Mike Cunnington. And IMA CEO Susie Keller.
Hi there. And I think Dr. Reed has jumped on.
Okay. And IMA Speaker of the House, Dr. Reed. Dan, if you want to say hello. Okay. All right. So here is an overview of the topics that we're going to go over today. So Sarah, if you could share the agenda. So we will be discussing everything from resolutions to reference committee reports and all the processes leading up to and during the House of Delegates. So this is meant to be kind of a 30,000-foot overview. So to start things off, we're going to watch a video that provides a general overview of the House of Delegates. And then we'll spend the rest of our time diving into each of these elements discussed on the video to give you a full understanding of the House of Delegates process. So Sarah, if you want to go ahead and run the video. This is just a few minutes, folks, but it's very well done. So.
Hello, my name is Dr. Daniel Reed.
And my name is Dr. April Dillian.
For more than 125 years, the Idaho Medical Association has held an annual House of Delegates meeting, as outlined in the IMA bylaws. Because the IMA is a physician-driven organization, the House of Delegates is an opportunity for members to meet with physician colleagues from around the state and to set IMA policy. We want to take a few minutes to explain how the House of Delegates process works so you can feel comfortable participating this year.
The House of Delegates, also called the HOD, serves as the official policy-making body of the IMA. This process is crucial to ensure physician voices are heard at the legislature and other regulatory agencies. The delegates are made up of IMA members from local and specialty societies. Similar to how the Idaho State Legislature considers bills at the State House each year, at the HOD meeting, delegates consider resolutions that are either adopted, amended, or rejected. Any adopted resolutions become IMA policy. In addition to the resolutions, the HOD also considers reports that provide updates on various IMA committees and programs. So what is a resolution?
Resolutions ask the IMA to either adopt an official policy stance on an issue, directs the IMA to take action on an issue, or does both. Each resolution can come from individual IMA members or various other groups listed here.
Each resolution must follow a templated format that IMA provides to the authors. The resolutions begin with whereas clauses that describe the issue. This is where the author provides background information, data, etc. If a resolution is adopted, the whereas clauses are not included as official IMA policy. However, the resolved clauses of a resolution contain the specific policy or directive being proposed. If the resolution is adopted, these resolved clauses must be able to stand alone and are incorporated in the IMA policy handbook.
Before the meeting, the reference committees are carefully selected to establish diversity and balance, reflecting the IMA's membership. Reference committees are responsible for creating a report to all delegates at the end of the meeting to recommend what actions should be taken on each resolution.
On Friday, the first day of the HOD meeting, these reference committees hold a hearing where delegates present each report or resolution on the agenda. For the resolutions, a presenter summarizes the whereas clauses and reads the resolved clauses verbatim. The presenter can then offer additional comments to illustrate the need of the resolution.
Then, following parliamentary procedure, the reference committee calls for discussion on each resolution. If delegates want to testify, ask questions, or debate the resolution, they will go to the nearest microphone to make their comments. Delegates must be recognized by the chair before speaking and must identify themselves, and should state their support or opposition to the resolution when applicable. The reference committee can ask delegates questions. If a delegate wishes to propose an amendment to the resolution, He or she must present the proposed language at the floor mic and fill out a written amendment form to submit to the IMA staff.
You might be wondering who is allowed to testify. At the Friday hearing, any IMA physician member, non-member, or IMA staff can testify. Non-physicians are allowed to testify if requested or introduced by a delegate. Meeting registration is not required to testify on Friday. However, only delegates can submit written amendments to resolutions. Delegates can make amendments on behalf of non-delegates as long as they provide full disclosure.
After the hearing is adjourned on Friday, the reference committees meet immediately to hold post-hearing deliberations, where they formulate their recommendations on resolutions based on the testimony and information they were given by the House of Delegates. Their recommendations are made into a report.
On Sunday morning, the reference committees then present their reports to the House of Delegates. Then, all the delegates can discuss and debate the recommendations for each resolution and report, submit amendments, and vote on each recommendation. The votes are to adopt, amend, or reject resolutions and reports. Only delegates displaying proper meeting credentials can cast votes. During this session, meeting registration is required to testify, and non-members and non-physicians are only allowed to testify if a delegate requests it and introduces them. Any adopted resolutions are added to the IMA policy handbook, and the IMA team works on the resolutions that require action.
So, for a quick review of what happens at the House of Delegates meeting. On Friday, resolutions are presented and delegates testify, debate, and can submit amendments to the resolutions. On Friday afternoon, reference committees create a report of the recommendations. Then on Sunday, this report is presented to delegates. Delegates can then testify, debate, amend, and then vote on each recommendation in the committee's reports.
We strongly encourage your active participation in this year's IMA House of Delegates so your voice can shape IMA policy. IMA staff, the IMA Board of Trustees, and experienced delegates are available to help answer any of your questions.
Thank you for all you do for Idaho, and we hope you enjoy the annual meeting.
Great. Thanks everybody. That was a great video. So if you have any questions during the presentations, please use the raise hand function or post it in the chat. Please note that this session is being recorded to serve as a resource for those who cannot participate live. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Sarah Beatty and Mark Snyder for their behind-the-scenes work and support for this boot camp. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Cunnington to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Baranaga. So you'll see pulled up here, we have our IMA policy manual. And this serves as our kind of guiding light for everything that we do, and it is the pathway to creating our policy at the House of Delegates. Our policy manual directs our advocacy efforts and serves as a handy tool for any of us that are approached or asked during a legislative session on IMA to weigh in on a potential issue. So let's take a quick look just at how we have everything organized and laid out in the manual. You'll see right here, when you open up the policy manual, the first thing you'll see is our table of contents. And everything is divided into 17 different categories. Just like any table of contents, you'll see that you have page numbers associated with each category. And everything is hyperlinked. So if you were to click on a category like public health and safety, you'll be quickly taken to that section of the manual. Once you get into a section, you'll see that there are a number of different subcategories that divide the larger categories up a little bit more finely. Each entry that is logged with the latest, newest resolution at the top. And if there's a chance that you can't quite find that subcategory that you're looking for, you can go to the page 38 of the manual and you'll hit the index, where you can also find everything based on the subcategory, and everything is hyperlinked, just as it was with the table of contents. So before we move on, does anybody have any questions regarding the policy manual? Perfect. To get the final policy manual product, the process begins by submitting your proposed policy in the form of a resolution. A resolution is the vehicle used to propose an official IMA policy and may be submitted by individual IMA members, committees, a local or special society, an outside physician entity or association, or the IMA Board of Trustees. The bulk of resolutions really come in two parts. Most important of these two parts is the resolves clause itself. This is the official IMA policy or directive that you are trying to achieve, and will be the content that makes the policy manual. The whereas clauses introduce the topic and is the content that is used to defend the resolves clause or IMA policy, or why the policy is necessary. The information in the whereas section may include the reasoning behind the issue, the urgency involved, the relevance to medicine, and so on. Whereas clauses provide the background for the discussion at House of Delegates and are not included in the final policy. This year, with the help of Sarah and Mark, we've made it a little bit more convenient to submit resolutions through our online portal. First and foremost, it's when using the portal, it's important to just double check whether we have IMA policy on a specific issue already. And you'll see on the slide there, we have the policy manual embedded. Once you verified, you'll include the subject or the title of the resolution. The author is the member or members that drafted the resolution. The resolution sponsors are also included. You'll see that sponsored by section there. Resolutions can be sponsored by individuals or their local medical society, specialty society, outside physician entity, or association. It's important to note that while not necessary, most successful resolutions are sponsored by one of those groups. Kind of concept there is that the more eyeballs on a product, the stronger the quality, and you'll also have additional support at the House of Delegates. So finally, the last thing on that submission form that you'll note, it'll ask about your attendance at the House of Delegates. Every resolution has to be debated during that Friday session of our meeting. And if you're not able to attend, it's important that we find somebody to fill in and introduce that resolution on your behalf. And that pretty much covers that. If I'll kind of take a pause there, does anyone have any questions on that just basic resolution process? Perfect.
Mike, actually, this is Mary.
Yeah.
The part that says IMA fiscal note and that sort of a thing, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that section's actually left off for the person submitting the resolution. IMA staff will go through, and we have a large database of information on what potential resolutions may cost the state, the impact to our resources as an organization, and then we kind of fill those in appropriately. Perfect. Well, if there's no other questions there, we'll go into just a brief timeline on what you can expect deadline wise coming up, now through the event itself. So resolutions will need to be submitted by August 21st so that our House of Delegates packets can be prepared and sent to IMA members on September 4th. For those members that are not able to attend in person, For those members that are not available to attend the House of Delegates at all, an early testimony tool is made available from September 9th through September 20th. And that just allows those people a pathway to testify and provide their expertise on potential resolutions. The House of Delegates officially begins on October 4th, when the Friday session begins. Reference committee reports are then finalized and sent out sometime on October 5th. And we'll get into that process here shortly. And then on October 6th, immediately prior to the Sunday session, delegates will be invited to participate in district society caucus meetings. And this is just a great opportunity for attendees to discuss the reference committee reports with other delegates in their region. So any questions on timeline of events?
Mike, this is Mary again.
Yeah.
So that early testimony tool where people write in and make comments,
Yep.
that will be available to the reference committee when they are writing their reports, as well as any notes that they take during the House of Delegates sessions. So the reference committee is listening to that and taking notes as well too. So they take both of those things into consideration when they're writing their reports, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And we compile those in like a nice, easy to read spreadsheet for those folks that are participating on the committee. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to kick it over to Dr. Dan Reed to discuss the Friday session of HOD.
All right, thanks, Mike. Hi, I'm Dan Reed, Speaker of the House for the IMA. As you've heard, the House of Delegates serves as the policy-making body of the IMA, and it functions much like the Idaho legislature, except it's actually functional. In the delegates propose, debate, amend, and vote on resolutions. Please watch the following video, which will provide a breakdown of the activities that take place during the Friday session of the House of Delegates.
On Friday, the first day of the House of Delegates meeting, reference committees conduct a hearing on the resolutions and reports submitted for consideration. During this hearing, delegates present each report or resolution on the agenda. Reports are presented at the podium or listed on the agenda's consent calendar. Resolutions are presented from the floor. Presenters of resolution should summarize the whereas clauses and read the resolved clauses word for word. Presenters may also offer additional comments to explain why a resolution is necessary. Remember, a resolution's whereas clauses are not considered for IMA policy. Resolved clauses contain the specific policies or directives being proposed. If a resolution is adopted, these resolved clauses are incorporated into the IMA policy manual and must be able to stand independently. Once a resolution has been presented, testimony will then be accepted. If an attendee would like to testify during Friday's hearing, ask questions, or debate a resolution, in-person attendees may approach the nearest floor microphone. Virtual attendees must use a designated technology platform to submit a request to testify. Testimony will be accepted by physician members of the IMA, non-members, IMA staff members, or non-physicians after being introduced by a delegate. All attendees must be recognized by the chair before speaking. They are asked to identify their name, the society they represent, and whether they speak to support or oppose the presented resolution. The best testimony is short and to the point. Please avoid repeating testimony already given, and please be respectful of differing viewpoints. During Friday testimony, attendees may wish to propose new or modified language, otherwise known as an amendment, to a resolution. Only delegates can submit amendments, but may submit one on behalf of non-delegates upon full disclosure. To submit an amendment to a resolution on Friday, all delegates must first fill out an amendment form clearly identifying the new or modified language they are proposing to a resolution's resolved clause. Remember that only resolved clauses can be amended, not the whereas clauses. In-person delegates will fill out a colored, handwritten amendment form, and virtual delegates will fill out an online amendment form via the link provided. All amendments must then be orally presented to the House of Delegates to be considered by the reference committee. Submit all amendment forms to IMA staff only upon completion of these steps. After the reference committees complete their agendas, testimony is closed. Reference committees then go into a closed session to determine the will of the House based on the testimony given. Voting on the reference committee report will take place on Sunday. Both in-person and virtual delegates may vote on Sunday, but must attend all or a majority of the Friday HOD meeting to qualify to vote at the Sunday HOD meeting. Therefore, please be sure to attend all day Friday if you would like to vote on Sunday.
So if there aren't any questions, I'll hand it over to Susie Keller to go into more detail about the specifics of how the reference committee does its work and how delegates can offer amendments to help shape IMA's policy. So take it over, Susie.
Thanks, Dr. Reed. So as mentioned in the video, after the main open Friday session, the reference committee members go into a closed session, and what they are trying to do is complete their work by assessing the will of the House. What was the discussion? Which way was it leaning on each item on the agenda, each resolution? So the reference committees go through and make that assessment for every single item. And then the IMA staff members then compile all of the reference committee's recommendations into the reference committee report. So this is an example of one from last year. As mentioned, the reports are posted on Saturday afternoon, and folks have an opportunity to review it then. And then the IMA has also created an opportunity before the House of Delegates session on Sunday for folks to get together with other delegates from their area just to review the reference committee reports together, so everybody has a common understanding of what those recommendations are. So we can dive into the reports themselves that you can see there on the screen. You can see for each resolution, the committee makes a recommendation to adopt, amend and adopt, not adopt, and some cases where it's not clear, they may take the unusual and unique option to refer the item to the Board of Trustees or another entity for a further look. And then the House votes on each of these recommendations separately, including whether to adopt an amendment and then whether to adopt the amended proposal. So it's a very stepwise process. And then once every reference committee recommendation is reviewed and voted upon, the finalized reference committee report then becomes a permanent record of that year's House of Delegates. And as mentioned, those specific resolve clauses then are incorporated into the IMA policy manual. So are there any questions about the reference committee reports themselves? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and jump into the amendment process. And delegates do, as mentioned, have the opportunity to offer amendments to these House of Delegates proposals, but there are two distinct processes for the Friday versus the Sunday session. All amendments must be in writing using these specially designated forms. So for Friday, during the reference committee hearings, delegates can propose their new or modified language to the resolution using these specific forms. And we ask that they first fill out a form clearly identifying where they want to make an amendment to the language of the resolved clauses. And because, as you know, whereas clauses cannot be amended because they fall away. So IMA staff can assist with wording and review of the amendment before it's proposed to the House of Delegates. We're happy to do that. But all of these amendments, and this is very important, have to be presented out loud to the House of Delegates in order to be considered by the reference committee. Written amendments not presented to the House of Delegates but given to a reference committee member or an IMA staff member are out of order and cannot be considered. So after all of the amendments are presented, they can then be considered and debated by the delegates. So now moving to the Sunday process, delegates then can propose amendments to the reference committee reports that we just showed you. So the delegates fill out a different form for the Sunday amendments because they are proposing amendments to the reference committee report, and we would then ask you to identify the specific page number and line number of the reference committee report for your amendments. Again, IMA staff can assist with this process, and proposed amendments will be displayed on the screens in the House of Delegates so that everyone can see in real time what the language is that's being proposed before consideration, debate, and voting. So to summarize, on Friday, amendments are to the proposed resolutions in front of the reference committees. And then on Sunday, proposed amendments are to the reference committee reports being considered by the full House of Delegates. Any questions about amendments? Okay, now we're going to do a deep dive into the Sunday process, so I'll hand it over to Dr. Jillian.
Hi, I'm Dr. April Dillian. I'm Vice Speaker of the IMA House, and for the Sunday session, on Sunday is the last day of the HOD meeting, and delegates review the reference committee's report, review their recommendations, and vote on the final resolutions and reports. Delegates are responsible for understanding the HOD process and reading all RCR recommendations before participating in the House business on Sunday. We have a video to watch, which provides a breakdown of the activities that take place during the Sunday session of the HOD.
After receiving testimony and proposed amendments for each resolution and report, the reference committees met in closed session to formulate recommendations on each resolution. The recommendations were based on testimony presented by the House and early testimony from IMA members prior to the HOD meeting. The resulting Reference Committee Report, or RCR, will be posted on the IMA website on Saturday, the second day of the HOD meeting, for all members to review. Each report will recommend one of the following actions for each resolution: adopt a resolution as presented, amend the language of a resolution and adopt as amended, not adopt a resolution, and/or refer a resolution to the Board of Trustees for further consideration. Sunday is the day each reference committee chair presents their RCR recommendations to the House. Delegates will discuss and debate each recommendation made in the report. Meeting registration is required to testify on Sunday, and non-members and non-physicians are only allowed to testify if a delegate requests it and introduces them. All attendees must follow parliamentary procedure and be recognized by the chair prior to making comments. For more information about parliamentary procedure for House business, please reference your parliamentary procedure handout. Before addressing the House, attendees are asked to give their name, the society they represent, and whether they speak to support or oppose the presented recommendation. Once discussion on a recommendation is concluded, delegates will vote to adopt, amend, or reject the recommendation. Only registered and properly credentialed delegates who attended most or all of Friday's HOD meeting are eligible to vote on Sunday. Each vote will take place using the designated technology platform with results displayed for all delegates to see. On Sunday, delegates may submit amendments to RCR recommendations prior to voting on a recommendation. Only registered delegates can propose an amendment to an RCR recommendation. To submit an amendment to an RCR recommendation on Sunday, all delegates must first fill out an amendment form clearly identifying the new or modified language they are proposing to the RCR. In-person delegates will fill out a colored, handwritten amendment form and virtual delegates will fill out an online amendment form via the link provided. All amendments must then be orally presented to the HOD for consideration. After an amendment has been explained, submit all amendment forms to IMA staff only upon completion of these steps. Once the amendment is received by IMA staff, the RCR will be amended live on screen for all delegates to review. The House will then discuss and vote to approve or reject any proposed amendments before acting on the final recommendation. The House adjourns after all RCR recommendations have been considered and voted upon.
And if there are no questions, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Reed to speak on parliamentary procedure.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dillian. So parliamentary procedure. It's important to note that we use parliamentary procedure to facilitate discussions in the House of Delegates. The IMA uses the Davis Rules of Order. And while parliamentary procedure may seem clunky at times, the rationale for using these rules is based on keeping order, slowing down the pace of deliberation to ensure consideration and promoting courtesy and respect among delegates when discussing controversial issues. So brief overview of parliamentary procedures. First, obtain the floor. That's the right to speak by standing and approaching a microphone or informing IMA staff that you'd like to speak virtually using the technology platform. Then you must be recognized by the chair, who can variously be the Speaker of the House, the Vice Speaker of the House, or the Reference Committee Chair before speaking. We ask that no member speaks twice regarding the same issue until everyone else wishing to speak has had the opportunity to speak once. All remarks are directed to the chair. Even when you're answering another member's questions, the remarks, even controversial remarks, should always be made respectfully, courteously, out of mutual respect. We don't verbally attack each other or use abusive language. All motions should be phrased with the I move to, and then whatever we're moving to. After making a motion, wait until another member seconds the motion. If the motion is debatable, the motion will then be debated as appropriate at the direction of the chair. When discussion of a motion is concluded, the speaker will call for a vote. Most votes require a simple majority, but there are some that'll require a supermajority vote, which is 2/3 in order to pass, and that's all would be governed by Davis rules again. And during the meeting, the good news is, since most of us aren't professional parliamentarians, there is a floor parliamentarian available to answer questions regarding procedure and to serve as a resource for the chair. If you're unclear about the pending motion, believe there's been a violation of the rules, an omission or an error, or if you need just help correctly wording your own motion, just rise to a point of order or a parliamentary inquiry. The goal isn't to use the parliamentary procedure for any other purpose than to facilitate the complete courteous discussion of the issue at hand. And there is a parliamentary procedure handout provided to each delegate at the meeting for further information about the types of motions that can be made during the meeting. I know that sounds like a lot. It tends to flow pretty smoothly. Any questions about parliamentary procedure? Or if not, back to Dr. Baranaga.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Whew, that was a lot. All right. So next, I want to just talk a little bit about the prioritization survey. So after the conclusion of the House of Delegates, the IMA will send out a prioritization survey to the delegates and IMA members to rank the importance of every adopted resolution. The reason we do this is because every year we approve a lot of resolutions, and this is an enormous workload for the IMA to carry out. Because we have limited staff and financial resources, we ask members to identify the issues that are of greatest importance to them so the board and staff can appropriately prioritize our limited resources for maximum benefit. So that comes out, everyone fills it out, and then it generates a list of priority from number 1 through whatever, how many there are. So any questions about the prioritization survey? All right. Annual meeting registration. So just a reminder that the registration is open. Please be sure to register well in advance to avoid a $50 late fee after September 20th. And don't forget to make your room reservations as soon as possible. Visit the annual meeting page on the IMA website for full details. So please make your reservations soon. With the time we have left, we'd like to ask if there's any questions you may have. Please use your raised hand use the raise hand function or drop a note in the chat.
This is April Dillian. If someone is concerned about how to write a resolution, what to do, who should they reach out to for help and assistance as far as wording and making sure that it sounds correct?
That's a great question, April, and I'm going to throw that over to Susie.
Yeah, well, your IMA staff is more than happy to help assist with any of those sorts of inquiries. As Mike mentioned, the first thing we'll probably do is refer to the policy manual to see if there's anything similar already there. And the best resolutions are very narrowly crafted to specifically target the end action of, is it talking to the Department of Health or the Board of Medicine, or is it proposing a rule or regulation in the state? So we can help advise that. We also encourage anybody who is working on a resolution to find a like-minded group, whether it's an IMA committee, your own local local county medical society, your specialty society, to, as Mike said, get as many eyes on it and coalesce around these things. We have found that the best resolutions have had a lot of consideration and input before they even make it to the House of Delegates. And then, like we said, the template that we have this year prompts folks to provide information that they may not have thought of on the front end. But we will put here, I'll put my email in the chat. And I did want to reference everybody to the chat as well. Mark has been sharing some key links that are great resources for folks for anything annual meeting related. So feel free to reach out to me or anybody else on the IMA team, and we can help with that.
Yes, Brittany.
Hi. In terms of medical student involvement, my understanding is that the main avenue for our involvement is going to be the student caucus. And where should we look for that and register for that?
Sure. So that is something that's a great question. And we wanted to provide this overview of the process first, because the student and resident avenue to participating in the House of Delegates is exactly as you say, through the caucus and through your elected representatives on the IMA board. And there's actually 4. There's a medical student representative, medical student shadow, resident rep, and resident shadow. So those folks are the main conduit, and they are the ones, the representatives who are allowed to actually vote on the floor of the House of Delegates. So we are hoping to work with the students and residents to create the caucus. And we are hoping to do that once the House of Delegates packet is posted on September 4th, because then that will allow everybody the opportunity to review those materials and have discussions on selected resolutions and give some input to your representatives who are going to be actually participating in the discussion and voting at the House of Delegates. So we're going to work with those key representatives to schedule those after the 4th of September. However, prior to August 21st, which is the deadline for submitting resolutions, we also know that some students and residents may want an opportunity to get together to talk with each other about potential resolution ideas, even on the front end. And so the IMA is more than happy to facilitate that process too, just by providing that virtual platform and enabling you as leaders to meet with your colleagues and talk about things that you might want to bring forward and facilitate the process of a resolution.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Chloe.
Thank you for holding this meeting. I was curious, who makes up the closed reference committee that is held Friday evening?
That's a great question. So we get a book of work in, all of these resolutions are submitted, and we usually divide into 2 reference committees just to share the load and share the workload of everything that needs to be considered. And so sometimes we try to divide them into, in recent years, all of the women's health issues are going to be in one reference committee and the other reference committee is going to tackle other stuff. And sometimes there's not always an alignment of issues, but we just separate them out for, like I said, ease of workload. The IMA staff works with our physician leadership to fill out who is serving on those reference committees. So they have to be a registered delegate. And we seek for the reference committee chair, somebody who has House of Delegates experience and hopefully has served on a reference committee before. But we really seek to get as much diversity as possible in terms of geography, specialty, gender, and whatever other characteristics folks may have to bring those various perspectives and viewpoints. So that is done by the IMA staff and our leaders, and those committees are selected in that way. And I think it's also important to note that the reference committees have no decision power to insert their own thoughts and opinions into the reference committee report. They are merely the listeners and synthesizers of what they hear on Friday and turn around what they believe they heard the will of the House on each resolution and report. So I think that's something, I'm glad you asked that question, so we can clarify that their job is just to listen, ask clarifying questions, and then turn around and say, this is what I think I heard, and therefore this is our recommendation on this resolution.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks everyone for participating. We really appreciate it. On behalf of the IMA board staff, we are so grateful for your engagement and support. Please feel free to reach out to any of us or staff member, anyone on the board or staff members with any further questions. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me. And oh wait, let's see. Let me get that in there. Okay. And I'm happy to get it to the person who might know the answer. So yeah, so thanks everybody. And this is recorded, so feel free to review it and have a good rest of your evening. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.